Hello and welcome. I am Clarissa Mosley. I am a psychologist and a psychotherapist and a couples counsellor. In this video, I'm going to be describing 4 different character types that can get confused. So hopefully this video will help you understand the differences between ADHD, high-functioning autism, narcissism, and psychopathy, and help you better discern whether your loved one might have some or all of these characteristics, which is why you're struggling with the relationship. What I want to emphasize is that this is not for the purposes of you diagnosing your partner. They would need accurate assessment with a suitable professional. I also want to emphasize that people can have various character traits that are part of one of these spectrums or character types, and they can also have one or more conditions. Somebody can be ADHD and a narcissist. Somebody could have high-functioning autism spectrum disorder and also have a lot of narcissistic character traits. What I'm hoping to do in this video is help you discern whether that narcissism that you see showing up isn't the result of somebody who is simply solely ADHD or high-functioning autism. And I also want you to keep an eye out for the signs of psychopathy. And that's why I've made this video, and I've spent a lot of time researching, watching other video sources from professionals, looking at the research, and also incorporating my own clinical observations. So let's start with your garden variety grandiose narcissist. They are high in their own arrogance. They have a great need for admiration. They are not good at accepting personal responsibility. They are very low in empathy. They have a huge sense of entitlement. They are often preoccupied with fantasies of their own success or worth. And they have an inability to handle criticism of any sort. And if they do feel triggered by that, they may resort to gaslighting, blaming, and projecting the problem onto the other person. There are several forms of narcissistic character types. The grandiose that I've just described, the vulnerable narcissist whose entitlement and sense of importance stems from how badly they feel they're treated or how much of a victim they might feel that they are. There is little mindsight or insight into the intentions of the people that they feel have done them wrong. There's an entitlement to special treatment by virtue of how much they feel that they are suffering. There are communal narcissists. These are people that get their supply from doing great things in the community, but they can also be very different, hostile, arrogant, and neglectful people when they are at home behind closed doors. The generous philanthropist, the runner of the charity, the huge donator, the angel investor, that kindly, saintly characteristic that they display in public does not come home with them. Behind closed doors, they can be a very different person, quite nasty, demeaning. People who are not important to the narcissist are often devalued, derided, and derogated, right? They're diminished. They are not important. They are often spoken about in a very scornful way. You can also have cerebral narcissists that get a lot of their supply from their intellect. They are the smartest person in the room. They know everything. And then there are malignant narcissists. And we need to keep an eye on these because we're sliding the scale right along the spectrum of narcissism into psychopathy. Malignant narcissists are Machiavellianists. They use people, they exploit people, they're often sadistic, they get pleasure or they gain satisfaction from seeing others suffer. So being in a relationship with someone who has a lot of narcissism can be very isolating, it can be very difficult. You can lose your sense of self, your sense of self-esteem, your sense of self-belief, because of the function of gaslighting, which is where the narcissist will make you feel that you are the wrong one, you are to blame, and you end up feeling quite crazy. The narcissist construction of reality and their ability to lie and twist the truth and abjectly refuse to take any responsibility and skillfully turn the tables on you can leave you reeling. And if you've been in a relationship with someone like that for some time, your sense of self and self-esteem could be so diminished that you don't know which way is up and down. Now, this is different from the sense of frustration you might have being in a relationship with someone who's got ADHD, whose attention is so scattered that you don't even know if you're present in their mind. And also different from being in a relationship with someone who's on the high-functioning autistic spectrum, where you might just feel neglected and lonely and isolated. And if you're unfortunately in a relationship with a psychopath, you are going to be highly controlled by them. All psychopaths are narcissistic. They have a grandiose sense of self. They can be charming and glib on the surface. People can think they are absolute champions, but not all narcissists are psychopathic. Now, we can find both narcissists and psychopaths in high-flying roles. They can be CEOs, the medical profession, surgeons, people that are very high up in companies and organizations in the corporate field. Salesmen, psychopaths make great salesmen. Teachers, psychiatrists, sometimes even psychologists. The military, police force. I must emphasize that not all people in these professions are psychopaths or narcissistic. However, we do find these character types gravitating towards such positions because they are granted power and control over other people. Someone with ADHD or someone that's in high-functioning autism doesn't necessarily want to control other people. So let's look at some areas of behavior and emotion and define the differences between these four different character types. So let's have a look at the scale of attention and focus. Now, obviously, someone with ADHD has issues with attention. That's the defining feature, is the distractibility and the inability to maintain focus. Now, this isn't true when it comes to something that the individual is highly interested in. People with ADHD can hyper-focus on things that they find stimulating, enjoyable, and that is giving them a little bit of a dopamine supply. Whereas boring, mundane tasks, things that require a lot of organization and time management, can be challenging for someone with ADHD. People with high-functioning autism have select interests that they really focus a lot of their attention and enthusiasm in. And some of these might be related to their job. So somebody who is an actuary or an accountant, they love numbers. Numbers are simple, they are predictable. Or they might have a collection, people that collect things. Someone who's very interested in a certain species of animals or birds. They might have an interest in crypto or finance. And they might look like just hobbies, but they know everything about it. And when they want to defend a point on that, they can become very impassioned and enthusiastic about that one or two specific subjects. The attention and focus in a narcissist is pretty much about them. So while someone with ADHD might butt in and blurt things out because they can't wait their turn, because they've had an idea about something new in their mind, and the distractibility can make them talk about this, and you might be saying something and they're like, oh, I just thought of something. So they take the conversation back to themselves or something that they're thinking of. That can appear narcissistic, right? Because you're like, well, what about me? You're talking about yourself all the time or what you've done, and you've completely ignored asking how I am. Now, that's going to be a little bit different from the narcissist who is going to be interested in you while you're in the love bombing phase, while they're drawing you in and finding out and learning about you. They may really tune into everything you're saying, as well as psychopath, because they want to learn what it is that motivates you and interests you, and how they can draw you into their web of control and influence. Are you worthy of that? If you're, with a narcissist, they want someone who's going to reflect back on their own self-image nicely. So the attention and focus of a narcissist might just keep drawing things back to themselves a lot. And so you kind of sort of start to see this pattern where, it's like that catchphrase. Okay, I've been talking about myself all the time. Enough about me, enough about me. What do you think of me? You know, it's classic narcissist dialogue. Psychopaths are going to be interested in their attention is going to be on you in a very airy way. You may have heard of the psychopathic stare. What this is a very steady gaze, and it's the person is analyzing your behavior. They're looking at you. There's something almost predatory about it. However, it can be misinterpreted as being alluring and attractive. They've got the steady gaze, and it makes it seem there's a mystery about it. And this is how psychopaths inspire people's interest and curiosity. However, when the psychopath is bored, they will just switch off. So unlike the ADHD who might just jump to another subject, or somebody who's on the spectrum who has decided that they're at the limit of their tolerance of listening to what you're talking about because it's of no interest to them, the psychopath can just switch off. It just goes dark in there. It just goes dead. It's like you've said something, they might just say something completely different, like not acknowledge what you've said. You might have said, wow, I think it might rain later, and they'll just go, I wonder what flights to Tokyo are right now. And it's like, well, they're talking, but they're not relating to what you've said. They're saying something about what they're interested in. They're not interested in relating to you. If we look at emotional processing, someone with ADHD struggles with regulation. So ADHD is not just about an attentional focus, so being able to keep one's focus on something. The way that the brain works, the attention can go anywhere, but the emotions can also. So it's important to realize that ADHD is also a neurodivergence, a difference in how people process emotions. So in ADHD, the mood can vary a lot, depending on whether they're interested in something, bored with something, frustrated with something, or triggered or activated by something. Rejection sensitive dysphoria is very common in someone with ADHD. And this is where the sense of being rejected in a relationship or socially can cause this huge collapse inside and trigger them into a dysregulated state. I've got a whole video on this, which I'll link, so you can actually understand it better. They struggle to regulate back or to not take it so personally and intensely. Now, this is going to sound like when a narcissist is triggered into their narcissistic wound. I want to make it clear we all have a narcissistic wound, and everyone has the potential to feel deflated, rejected, wounded, and hurt. The narcissist's way of doing this is by getting triggered into a backlash. So somebody with ADHD, when they're spiraling, they may or may not get angry and resentful because they're kind of lost in this feeling of falling off a cliff. And, well, of course, somebody with ADHD has got a shame system. They might spiral into shame. Now, we've got to also flag that somebody with vulnerable narcissism can spiral into shame and stay there and express a lot of feelings and thoughts about being unworthy and how could anyone do that to them. But somebody who's a more grandiose narcissist is going to dip down into that shame and that narcissistic wound and come back out fighting. They will get you back, right? If you've slighted or insulted or criticized and said or done something that they don't like, you'll probably know about that very soon. There could be the presence of the narcissistic rage, which can come out in an overt way, but it could also come out as a passive-aggressive way of stonewalling you. You've done something wrong to trigger them, and you are really out in the cold for as long as they feel like it. And then maybe there'll be some kind of twisting it around to make it that you did this terrible thing, that it's got nothing to do with them, and how could you? And before you know it, you're going to be apologizing to the narcissist for having a feeling or saying anything that they didn't like. The emotional processing of someone on the high-functioning autistic spectrum is variable. They can suffer from what we call alexithymia, and that is the inability to interpret and name one's own emotions. And that doesn't mean that they do not have them. It just means that they're not able to articulate them well. And this can cause a feeling of detachment or withdrawal because they get overwhelmed and they need to retreat. It might look like they're an introvert needing time and space out, or that they're being avoidant, but really they're trying to cope with what's going on inside of themselves that they're not quite able to process or be aware of yet. So this does not mean that if they are high functioning on the spectrum that they don't have empathy and they're not concerned about how you're feeling. They might just struggle to know exactly what to do with it. People with ADHD, by the way, have got highly intact empathy. There is nothing about having attention deficit disorder that makes you unempathic. You are still wired up as a warm-blooded human. Someone who's narcissistic, low empathy. And somebody who's psychopathic, zero empathy. Defining feature of psychopathy, they do not have empathy for others. They do not experience emotions in the same way that we do. They have a very limited range of emotions. So their emotional responses are going to be very dry and stale, which might be confused with someone who's high functioning on the spectrum. But what I'm saying again is that that person has got emotions inside them. The psychopath doesn't. So while the person on the spectrum might be masking their emotional responses, their facial expressions can be quite stoic and flat. The person on the psychopathic spectrum, they're just cool. So you ask them, what are you feeling inside? And you might get the response like, calm. They do not experience joy and excitement and this bandwidth of rainbow of emotions that most of us experience. They don't feel fear. That's a big standout thing. So you're not going to see the same level of anxiety in someone as a psychopath as you are as in somebody who's, say, an ADHD or high functioning on the spectrum. Those people on the spectrum have got a lot of anxiety and they may mask it well, but it is in there. The psychopath, flatline. They don't get your emotions. They don't really care. They can learn how to have what we call cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is where you understand that there is a thing happening that you should display some sort of feeling towards or pretend. And it's not the same as emotional empathy where you actually really feel the effects of things. Look at the difference between, say, somebody's watching something, a horror thing happening on television, on the news. There's been an accident and the psychopath can, or the narcissist can stand there and go, those poor people, are like their family must be distraught. That's cognitive empathy. They understand that there's a situation that warrants sympathy or the appearance of it. And emotional empathy, where you'll see or know or learn of something highly emotionally distressing and you will inflect yourself into the feelings of the people in the situation or the people that will be affected by it. And so if we look at the same news story about this terrible accident where people died, you're like, oh man, that's awful. There could be tears. A sign of empathy is when the bottom, imagine being the mother of that kid. Right? So you can see it happening in the face. You can tell that there's an empathic response happening there. Socially, someone with psychopathy is going to be interacting in a more predatory way or getting their narcissistic supply. They might seem very cool, calm and collect in all social situations. Nothing really rattles them. Again, if we look at what isn't going on in them emotionally, they're not going to get anxious, they're not going to get upset, they're going to be able to control a situation really well. If you imagine what it is like to have none of the emotions that go on inside our body, especially if you're a woman, then you'll imagine how much energy you would have at your disposal, how much focus, how you could always seem cool, calm and collect even if you're not. Socially, obviously, psychopaths can have narcissism, but a narcissist socially is going to be looking for the people that are good to know, that are going to reflect back on their ego image as being successful, smart, popular, and the people that are not falling into that category are not important and uninteresting. Socially narcissistic people can show up as very charming, gregarious, the life of the party. They can be a heap of fun to hang out with. Someone on the spectrum, however, it's social situations that get them. They are difficult. There is a lot of stimulation, there is a lot of things to work out there. If they've got prosopagnosia, which is basically the inability to read faces and emotions on faces, people doing all sorts of laughing and smiling can be overwhelming. Now, this isn't always the case with someone on the spectrum. Sometimes they can be pretty cool and they can be maybe even a little bit more sociable. But overall, most people on the spectrum prefer routines and structure. And so dipping into the social world might involve only a few select friends that share similar interests. And this might be distinguished from work, where they have superficial relationships with their work colleagues that just don't go any deeper than hello, how are you, good day. Someone on the ADHD spectrum, variable sociability. And I think really what's going to stand out there is their ability to pay attention. They might enjoy the dopamine stimulation that they get from socializing. They can be just as funny and as gregarious as the next person. Behaviorally, we're going to see in ADHD, the disorganization. Now, I'm not saying this is always true, but I think if you want to find out, look at the mess in the room, look at the disorder. It's not that somebody with ADHD can't be organized and tidy up, but the default thing is a little bit messy, a little bit disorganized. They might pick up interests and drop them just as quickly because it's not interesting to them. Whereas somebody on the autistic spectrum likes routine, structure, and repetitive behaviors. They might be happy eating the same thing for dinner, lunch, or breakfast repeatedly across the course of time. In fact, they feel safer that way. They might have a rigid routine where they need to get up, go for their run, do this, and it has to happen in a certain order in order for them to feel at peace. Someone narcissistic or psychopathic can also have these traits. I think a narcissist is a little bit more flexible and liable. The behavior can change according to the narcissist's reality in the moment. Basically, they can make up their own rules as they go along. Psychopaths have an interesting relationship with this. They like their rules. They have their ways of doing things. If you want to look at a really good character portrayal in the movies, take a look at the character of Anton in No Country for Old Men. So he's very cool, calm and collect, but he has a set of rules that he wants to follow. Now this again can get confused with the structure and boundaries that someone high functioning on the spectrum needs in order to feel safe and regulated. But for the psychopath, it's their own construct of rules and ways of being that it's just colder. It's not for their anxiety. It's just the way that they've set up their life. It's calculated, it's cold, and it can be speckled with thrill-seeking behavior. Because while they have no fear, they enjoy high-intensity activities that might be sort of a little bit life or death, because a psychopath, as we've mentioned, does not experience fear or anxiety. This is why they might be found in the military, in the police force, and in surgery, and in jobs that require great precision and focus, where they can apply a set of rules to what they are doing and do the job and get power and control from that. Someone high functioning on the spectrum might be applying the same rules and precision, but it's coming from their own intellectual relationship with this thing that they're negotiating. And it's also providing a structure and a safety and the boundaries of which they can operate, because they do experience anxiety. ADHD, as I've mentioned, has a variable relationship with anxiety and fear. Sometimes the anxiety can be about one's own self-image and social situations. If we look at somebody who's grown up with ADHD and they may have been subject to bullying or teasing when they're at school, they might have been aware that they were not performing well in class because of their inability to pay attention. They might have got in trouble for this, and all of these things serve to shape the self-esteem and the personality of the person growing up. So somebody who's got narcissism, they are probably going to be more afraid of their own self-image. This doesn't mean to say that they don't have anxiety about getting on a plane. They can have their own little things where they feel unsafe. Okay, let's have a look at each of these types in interpersonal relationships. Again, I am generalizing and cherry picking a few different behaviors to help you understand. With somebody with ADHD, the person they're in a relationship can struggle from this changeability and variable attention. So the relationship can be chaotic due to the impulsivity of the person with ADHD, their lack of follow through on tasks, and their distractibility when it comes to paying attention to you. This can show up in the bedroom. So imagine if somebody with ADHD has got distracted by something, that's going to put them off the game in the bedroom, and it's going to put you off because you're not going to feel that they're attending to you or they're present to you. On the other hand, ADHD and hypersexuality have been highly correlated. And so this means that their ADHD person might want sex, a lot of sex, impulsive sex, different sex. So they're getting a dopamine buzz out of the sex. This can also stem into porn use, that can be highly stimulating of the dopamine system for someone with ADHD. They can jump from, different porn scenarios to different ones. And this can keep them very stimulated, but also cause problems when they want to translate this or maintain that same amount of interest in the room with you, a real person. Obviously, someone with a high-functioning autistic spectrum, they do want relationships just like any other human mammal, while it might be more challenging for them because of their own emotional understanding and ability to read into the emotions of another. So while it's been reported that somebody in the spectrum can be a really good, loyal partner, when they love, they are faithful and loyal to you, you can be in that relationship and still feel very alone and isolated. Because if they don't have that ability to read your face, your emotions, your tone, your mood, simply as a result of their neurodivergence, it can leave you feeling like you're very alone. When you have a huge emotional response and they don't get it, you might feel like there's something wrong with you, you're neglected, and so that can cause a rift in a relationship. Sexually, I can't pigeonhole someone who's on the spectrum, but I do think that they are slower to warm up. There can be a lot of sensory issues in someone on the spectrum, meaning a sensory processing disorder where touch and tactile things need to be at a certain, this can also happen with ADHD, they need to be at a certain pressure or at a certain pace. They may not want that closeness and cuddles as much as you might, right? And in ASD, because their body processes the signals differently. This can transfer also in both of these neurodivergencies into overstimulation in crowded, noisy places, bright lights, lots of things moving around. Think shopping malls and airports, they can be quite overwhelming. Think sitting in a restaurant where there's a bunch of people talking, the music's turned up loud, and your ADHD or high-functioning spectrum person cannot pay attention to you because of all the distractions. Somebody with narcissism, to be in a relationship with a narcissist is chaotic. Your reality will be challenged, your emotions are going to be all over the place according to their mood and their tempo or their needs. You're going to be attending to their needs a lot because they need that supply. You're going to be regulating them a lot, whether they're a grandiose or a vulnerable narcissist. If they're grandiose, you're going to be in the background to their limelight. If they're vulnerable, you're going to be having to stroke their ego and shore them up a lot. Otherwise, they may turn their attention to get that supply somewhere else. And narcissists are actually known for being not bad in bed initially. So in the initial love bombing, gaining their supply stages, their need for admiration can make them a keen and attentive lover. It might even be with the narcissists and their fun, spontaneity that it could have been some of the best lovemaking you've ever had. But the interesting thing is that this can switch off. When you have fallen from grace or out of the co-ideal with the narcissist, when you are not giving them the supply that they need, when you've triggered their narcissistic wound or rage, they can switch off their attentiveness to the bedroom, to you sexually, and leave you out in the cold. This might be a form of conscious or unconscious punishment also. Psychopaths. Okay, psychopaths do get married and have children. It's often as a ruse because psychopaths and narcissists, well, anyone can have a double life, but if they're a psychopath, there is like a very high chance that there is a double life going on there, and that the wife and house and children and job are a ruse. They're a front to give them a place in the community that makes them look like they are a great person, and they believe that they are, but in the background they are committing horrendous acts. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a serial killer on the side, although we can think of many characters where this has applied. But it can also mean that they've got a dark side that is with the wife and then going out to brothels, several times a week. Psychopaths are interested in sex. They find it stimulating and thrilling. They are interested in control, and they see people as an object. This means that the psychopath is not discerning about who they have sex with. They can be attracted to any gender, any sex, male, female, any age, child, boy, girl, or even animals. Other people, individuals, are objects for them to exploit, control, and dominate. And so while they might be having this double life of seeming like an upstanding John Doe in the community who's got a position of influence and power, they could be using that to exploit, say, children, clients. If they're in the military, obviously they've got access to being able to carry out, or a police force to carry out a lot of dark behavior. Or they could be in the back room of the house grooming children online. I know this sounds horrible, but it happens and we need to be aware of it. So this is not an end-all definitive analysis of these 4 different character types and how they show up in relationship and in the world. I will emphasize that you do more research and encourage your partner to seek diagnosis if you think that they might be ADHD, or if you think that they might be high functioning on the spectrum. If you get a sense that your partner is a narcissist, or worse, a psychopath, be very careful. Getting out of those relationships, exposing people, can be very dangerous. There is a high prevalence of intimate partner violence, domestic violence in relationships with people that are highly narcissistic and psychopathic. Obviously, they do not feel empathy or remorse. Did I underline that? People with ADHD and on the spectrum, they feel remorse, they feel guilt, they feel shame, they know when they've done something wrong. They may lie, right? Somebody with ADHD might lie to save their skin, to avoid conflict, to not get in trouble. But somebody who's a narcissist or a psychopath lies compulsively. A psychopath lies as a sport. Why wouldn't they? They're cool. They want to control you and dominate you. So having a very elaborate life constructed out of lies isn't uncommon in psychopathy. The problem is when that's exposed, or if it's designed towards an agenda, then that's dangerous. So if you've worked this out, I would encourage you to seek further help, to keep it a little bit low key while you explore more or understand what you might need to do to get out of that relationship safely. It's not a good reason for you to go in accusing them of being a narcissist, or I've got your number, you're a psychopath. A psychopath will go away, work out what they're going to do in a cold, calculated way. It's not going to bother them. They're not going to have any remorse if they are intending to hurt you. Someone who is a narcissist is going to act in a not maybe so dangerous way, but we don't know how much their pride being wounded, because they do not want to fail. And if it's not in their life plan that you are going to leave them or be unhappy with them, then they are not going to feel that much empathy for you not being happy, because it's all about them. They can be highly abusive and they can feel quite entitled to seek revenge or retribution 10 to 100 times greater than what has been actually done to them. You know, if you've said, I don't think this is working anymore, they could go, well, let me see about that, you know, and it comes back to you 10 times worse. So just be wary. There is a big difference in these characters and how things can pan out and end up at the end of the day or at the end of a relationship. And that's a whole nother topic. But hopefully for now you have some gist of an understanding about whether your partner is falling into one of these categories, has a combination of 2 or 3 different aspects. And also, one thing I didn't mention that's really important is that all of these people can have mood disorders. Someone who's narcissistic on the spectrum or ADHD can definitely have an anxiety disorder or struggle with depression. So that can also maybe help you work things out a little bit better and respond appropriately. Remember, all of these people, sans a psychopath, are humans, and humans that you've likely spent a lot of your time and energy and pouring your love into. None of these character types are liable to change, meaning it's embedded in their personality and who they are. If somebody is on the spectrum, your ability to understand that this is the reason why you feel things aren't quite right and you feel a sense of isolation in the relationship. The bad news at the bottom of that is that even the diagnosis is going to affirm that this is part of who that person is, and it's unlikely to change. But it can provide you with tools of understanding and working with that relationship and that individual better, because you know what's going on. It's not so personal to you. So I will leave you on that note. I hope you've learned something. If you have learned something, please drop me a like, subscribe if you'd like to hear more of my learnings and wisdom that I will share, and leave any comments if anything has felt relevant to you in this exposition. I do have a sheet that will outline these 4 different character types and the different behavioral traits that we've discussed and some more. So if you want to get access to that, please drop it in the link below. And other than that, may your relationship continue to flourish, or may you make the best decisions for yourself and everyone moving forward. Thank you.